The second show of 2022. Welcome, everyone. Happy Fierce Female Friday. It is a beautiful, beautiful Friday here in Seattle. I'm guessing it's beautiful down in Southern California, eh, Sara?
Oh my goodness. You see, this is all natural light.
Is it? And
It
we'll
is
find out
beautiful.
what the weather is like where Ivonne is as well. But before we get to our magical guest of the hour, let's do some updates. We do have a couple things happening in the Woman Up side of things. First is next week is our first coffee and conversations with Leslie. She is actually putting together a beautiful content flow for you this year. There's going to be some book clubs in there, and she is bringing together some of her dearests for coffee around a table with Leslie this year. So keep
Love it.
an eye out for that. Again, every single Friday will come to you at 2:00 Pacific Standard Time or Pacific time with some sort of a show, either a shine a light on her interview like we're doing today. It may be a wisdom session or again, a coffee and conversation with Leslie. So you can confidently mark Fridays at 2:00 to come around the table with all of us. If we're not here with you live, it'll always be a replay of one of our most popular or maybe contentious replays. Let's see. We also are still in our building out of the rest of the content calendar for the year. And you know how it works around here. We look to you to find out what your leadership skill desires are. So make sure you visit the post. We'll drop the link in the chat here and share with us what leadership skill or skills you want to learn or sharpen in 2022. That is how we formulate the content each month, how we add in fun conversation questions in our interviews. And of course, it's also part of the strategy for the conference that we bring to you in person. Come on, fingers are crossed. And again, if you don't have that down on your calendars, please protect August 30th, 31st, and September 1st. We are manifesting the opportunity to be together in person in Huntington Beach at the Paseo. So let us all send good energy for that. All right, Sara, I'm dropping the mic to you. What's happened in the industry?
Well, thank you, Debra. Debra Trapin, our amazing strategist for WomanUP and just all things women empowerment. We love you, Debra. I am Sara Sudachan. I'm Senior Vice President at the California Association of Realtors, overseeing our member information group, which includes our research function. We have an amazing team led by our DEI. Sorry, that's not the right officer, led by our chief economist, Jordan Levine, and vice president. And then we also have our DEI function under my department, and that is led by Farah Welder. Hopefully she's listening. Hello, Farah. She's our DEI officer, and we'll get to work with Ivonne so closely this coming year. We're very excited about that. And we also have WomanUP and steps toward home ownership and transaction rescue, all kinds of things at CAR we're doing to support and help realtors be a success. So that's me. And I am so excited to bring to you our Peloton Monday morning Peloton ride for WomanUP. And thank you to Leslie. Leslie Appleton Young is my predecessor, and she came up with this idea. She's like, I want to hold myself accountable, and this is the group to do it. So we're going to hop on the Peloton 6 a.m. every Monday. You'll see Leslie, you'll see me, you'll see Jennifer Branchini, our president, you'll see Heather Ozier, our treasurer. You'll see a lot. See Sabrina Brown. I know we'll see you on there. We'll see Sandra Miller from Engel Volkers. You'll see a whole bunch of us. High five. And if you don't have the app but want it, there's a 2-month free trial. So and you're thinking about it. So there's that.
Ooh,
Yeah,
hey,
really
that's cool. I can maybe do that on my rower.
Yes, you can. You really can. It'll be fun.
Ooh, that's a great idea. Thanks for the tips, Sara.
Thank you. I pulled that one straight from Jen. She shared that with our whole board of directors. And I was like, yeah, we need to share that more. Free trial, go for it. And speaking of, we just wrapped our virtual board of directors meetings, our first one for 2022. And I just kudos to our volunteer members who show up and had to sit in Zoom for hours and hours and hours. They did a lot of work. Our leadership team, led by Otto Katrina, who's a big WomanUP supporter, Jen Branchini and Heather, really great. We installed our new CEO, John Seabury, who's coming from Missouri, and he starts on February 1st. Huge background in legislation, he's a legislative expert and guru. So we're really excited to bring him on board. And that leads me to my last update, which is Legislative Day, or commonly known as Ledge Day in California. And we are having 2 Ledge Days in California. One will be a fully virtual event on Huva on March 2nd. So we'll put that info in the chat. And then one, fingers crossed, hope to be in April during the spring, where we usually go and run on the Capitol in California. We go and we have thousands of realtors go talk to their legislator.
Do we need to bring back the WomanUP high tops?
Yes.
I think we need to get those back in the shop. We need to have, I mean, surely for the photo op
that
all of us in those.
Great, because I will tell you how powerful it is to see all of those realtors storm the Capitol in a very good and advocacy way. Like it is, they have their talking points, and they're there working for all of California realtors and homeownership. So that's a big day. We love Ledge Day. And I hope to see you there. If you haven't been to a Ledge Day, you can get your toe in the water on March 2nd for our virtual, and you could come to your first Ledge Day in person in Sacramento. So that's it for me.
I can't hear you talk about this. You know what I'm going to share, right? So when Sara and I first started working together, she messaged me about this event in April called Leg Day. She texted me and she was like, Leg Day. I'm like, Leg Day? What is Leg Day? I mean, I was beside myself. And she was like, no, we say it like ledge. I'm like, oh, okay. That makes perfect sense. Yeah,
it's not Leg Day as opposed to Biceps Day or
I'll never forget that. And from that day forward, now it will always be the emoji leg for Ledge Day. That is the icon. Speaking of all of the wild terms you need to learn in real estate, let's get to our guest who is just dipped her toe in the water of corporate real estate. Welcome to the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Realogy, Ivonne Furneaux.
Hi, ladies. Thank you. I wrote down Leg Day too. And I thought when I go back to that note, I'm going to be very confused. I'm also terrified to use a Peloton after it gave Big a heart attack and killed him. So,
right.
Spoiler alert for those who haven't watched the new season, but
yes. Yeah, that big. Exactly. Right. I'm like, I'm not sure that was like the best use of brand connection. Whatever. All right. So let me read Yvonne's bio, because I want you to all just close your eyes and let this soak in. So she joined Realogy in late 2021, so during the plague, as the company's VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And we also talk about that as DEI around here. So in her role, she leads the company's DEI team and business strategy to drive DEI both internally and externally. Ivonne is a business leader with more than 20 years of experience in corporate communications, culture, and DEI. She's worked in large multinational organizations across various industries, including retail, manufacturing, healthcare, and real estate. Most recently, Ivonne led DEI programs at United Health Group, a Fortune 5 healthcare company. Yvonne previously led communications, community relations, and DEI for SSAB, one of the largest steel manufacturing companies in the world. Wow. She has also previously held leadership roles at several companies, including Target, or
Right.
Target, Office Depot.
Target. It will always be Target.
Target
Always
forever.
till the end of time. Office Depot, Coinstar, and GMAC Home Services. Ivonne holds a bachelor's degree in communications from the University of Minnesota. Whoop, whoop, my home
Go
state.
Gophers. Go Gophers.
And has completed graduate studies at the University of Denver in strategic human resources. I love the sound of that. She is originally from Brooklyn, New York, but as a military brat, she grew up all over the United States. Ivonne and her family currently reside in the western suburbs of Chicago.
Yes.
Chi-town. I love it. Oh my goodness.
Shout out to Central Time.
Oh, the time zones. Oh, that kind of gives me a little bit of a headache. So let's dig in and let's talk about your leadership story, how you got where you were. And we always want to weave in there, were you recruited for your position at Realogy or did you apply?
Okay. Well, I will start my journey, started in the realm of communication. So I will tell you, if I go way back in my journey, I thought I was going to be a journalist. All right. I was the editor of my high school newspaper, and I thought I'm going to go win a Pulitzer Prize someday. I'm speaking truth to power. I'm writing exposés, so that was my love and passion early on. And so that's what I went to college for. And then after college, I realized maybe being a reporter isn't going to give me the best life down the road. So I went into corporate communications, and that's when I started working at Target. And I worked there for 5 years in communications. And over time, I was working in different companies and different industries, always around that bread and butter of employee communications, especially. And I loved the idea of it fed into my background as a journalist. Employees to me were almost the forgotten audience in companies. Sometimes, we care a lot about our customers and our shareholders, but employees are they're your strongest advocates if you do right by them. And so I always saw myself as this advocate for employees and this conduit between the front lines and the C-suite. So that really kind of was my favorite thing to do. And over time, though, I started working at companies that I went through a series of companies where they went through a merger, a corporate relocation, a mass layoff. It got so bad that it was a joke with my friends that they refused to work anywhere that I worked because inevitably something would happen and the company would move. And, during this time, every time it happened, I had to kind of figure out what my next move was going to be, right? So, and through a lot of those years, I was a single mom too. So I was kind of limited in my choices. I couldn't just pick up and move to Houston when it was offered. And I couldn't take time off either to just figure out what my next move was and just kind of be. So I had to make a lot of tough choices along the way, taking lateral moves, going into different industries. That's why when you read my bio, it's like, man, she's worked in manufacturing and retail. It's always by necessity. I had to go find another place to work, and along the way, though, I learned a lot and I became really adept at change management. I was always the person to go to when a company was going through a merger, and I would handle and manage all of the communication processes around that, and making sure always having empathy at the center of that, because knowing that this was going to affect a lot of employees and their livelihoods. So that for me was a nice segue as I started working in the DEI space. I started learning more about it. And about 10 years ago, I started doing it more formally when I was at a different company working with an external agency, starting up a DEI coalition in my company and starting to do the actual business strategy work behind that. So over time, that just became more and more of the bulk of my work until eventually I just transitioned into doing DEI full time. And
wait, before you go on, so what year was it that you started it doing your DEI work? Do you remember?
Probably about 10 years ago, maybe.
So before it was
before it was cool. Yeah, 10, maybe 12 years ago, even if I really think hard on it. Gosh, you're gonna
I was
really test my memory.
Yeah, no, I get it. And CAR was doing DEI for as long as my tenure, 20 years. That's kind of what I was doing. But it wasn't, the forefront, and now it needs to be, right?
Correct. Yeah. And at the time I was working for a more progressive company. I mean, even 20 plus years ago, I don't want to date myself too much, when I was working at Target, we were talking about the strength of many, the power of one. Like, we had diversity at the forefront. We were making sure that the images you see when you walk into a Target store are reflective of the communities in which they operate. That was all happening 20 years ago. So, this recent push obviously has been brought about by social justice movement in recent years, and then accelerated by the murder of George Floyd a couple of years ago. But, for me, DEI, it really spoke to what I said earlier, this idea of, speaking truth to power and being an advocate and an activist. So, I became more and more kind of passionate about the goals of DEI to create a more diverse workplace, to create those inclusive spaces where everyone can be their authentic selves, and to have fairness at the heart of everything, right? So also, I'd worked in communications for so long, where I was always telling the stories of other people. I'm writing speeches for CEOs, I'm writing speeches for governors, I even wrote a speech for Julie Andrews back in the day, because she was coming to speak at an event. And so I was always telling the stories of others. So yeah, cool, really cool. But I was like, I want to share my story. And DEI gives me the opportunity to share my own story, and to help amplify the voices of those who don't always have a voice and whose stories haven't always been told. So that for me has really fueled my passion too. So you asked me about my current role. So I actually saw this role posted on LinkedIn. I was perfectly content where I was in United Health Group, but I saw this role and it just sparked something for me that I thought, this sounds really exciting. I had worked in real estate previously in another life, very long time ago, and it was not a great experience. So part of it for me too was this idea that I could maybe come back into this industry and make a change for the better, so that people who come after me didn't have the experiences that I did at a different company. So that really was a motivating factor for me as well. It was like this chance at redemption. So, I saw the role and I thought, I'm really interested in this. And I did something really bold, and I emailed Tanya Rue Narvaez, the Chief People Officer of Realogy. I signed up for a premium membership on LinkedIn so I could send an email, and I did. And then I got a call from a recruiter, and the rest is history. So that bold move is what brought me to today. So sometimes it pays off.
Oh my gosh, I love this story. I love it so much. I do now that you're saying that. So tell us, were you working in corporate real estate before, in that first round? Oh, it was.
Yeah.
Were you in an office, or were you at like a headquarters? You don't have to.
I was at a headquarters office, a corporate headquarters office. Yeah. So
yeah, real estate 20 years ago is very different than real estate is today.
Yeah.
In
and
some
it has
ways.
been a completely new experience. It's yes. In some ways.
I was going to say,
others,
we
similar.
have work to do. I do think, and huge kudos to Tanya and Realogy for putting the resources behind DEI. You can see it. You're here. You could see it before you started, but this is a big deal, and it's something so important for companies to catch on to.
Yeah, and I don't want to underplay that. I mean, Realogy was doing right by DEI long before I came along, and they've really been at the forefront of the industry for many, many years. Putting a stake in the ground with the Equality Act, and creating an inclusive ownership program to attract more diverse franchise owners. And so they were doing a lot of great things. We have some amazing industry partnerships like this one, and with NARUP and other groups that really have helped advance the industry. So Realogy, led by Tanya, really did a great job before I came along. But to your point, Sarah, like now it's like, let's take it to the next level and see how much more bold we can be.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, DEI work in particular, and I know this from personal experience, has its own set of challenges, right?
Yes.
Let alone the regular challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis. But would you take us back and look at some huge challenge, some roadblock, and what you learned from it? A lot of times we're scared to do things, especially as women, but as human beings, that stops us because we're scared of failure. But yet, if we take the failure as a life lesson, it would be a different perspective, right? We would, and we all of the women on our stages, the red thread throughout, to quote Debra, has been a lesson from a failure, or turning that failure into fuel.
Yeah.
So why don't you share
Yeah.
a little bit about yours?
Sure. Well, like I said, I had worked at a series of companies that had something out of my control happen, right? And one defining moment for me, I really early on in my career was like, I got to climb this ladder and I got to climb it as high and as fast as I can, right? And I had been working for a company that we were based in Chicago. We merged with a company in Seattle. And I was asked to lead the communications team for the new entity that was being created. So it was a big step up for me, but it meant having to travel to Seattle quite a bit. And I mentioned I was a single parent at the time. I had moved to Chicago, not knowing a soul, honestly, for a different position. So it was just my son and me. So, I had to go to Seattle to run a big meeting with the CEO. And my son went off to school and I'd made arrangements that after school he was going to go to the babysitter, spend the night, and I'd come pick him up the next day. Literally 5 minutes before I'm supposed to get on stage with the CEO, I get a call from the school that he's sick and I need to come pick him up. And I'm thousands of miles away. Okay. And I'm about to run this huge meeting. And I almost had a breakdown in that moment. I had to pull myself together to get through the day, ran off to the airport, scrambling to find somebody who could go get him. Got a hold of a friend who was able to pick him up until I was able to come home. And thank God for the power of girlfriends. Let me just say that too. Can't underestimate
We all know
the
that.
importance of the great girlfriends in your life. Thank you, Brenda, for that day. But on my way home on the plane, I'm crying and I realized, like, I can't do this. This job is not going to work for me. As much as I would love this opportunity to step up in my career into this new role, my life just doesn't allow it. And I'm sure there are other women on the call who could probably relate to being in similar scenarios in your lives. And that was a really tough pill for me to swallow at that stage in my career. And, I started my job search the next day and went out and found something. And ultimately I ended up in a better place. But it was really hard in that moment not to feel like a failure, not to feel like, this is an obstacle that I couldn't overcome, not to feel resentment for my life situation, whatever it may be, So I understand now that, all of those things brought me to where I am today and all the rest of that corny stuff, right? But in the moment, it just felt like such an obstacle to my career progression that, but I just had to make those tough choices. And sometimes we all have to do that, So that was probably one of the hardest moments I've had in my career that I had to overcome.
I think it's the strength and it's the power of your intuition, right? You knew at that moment that it was the wrong place for you.
Right.
And you made a change. You made a career change based on that moment. And what we often do is not listen to our intuition. We shove it down. Yet we're so quick to listen to our negative self-talk, but we're not quick to listen to our intuition. And when she's telling us, this is wrong for you. So I love that you took that and you made a difference in your life. Looking back and given that perspective, what would you do differently? Or would you?
I mean, I wouldn't have done anything differently, like logistically. I wouldn't have hired a different sitter or made sure, what I would have done thinking back on it now is just given myself more grace and not been so hard on myself, because I took that as my own personal failure as a mother, as a career professional, you name it, it was my own failure. And looking back, my wiser and older self looks back and says, don't be so hard on yourself. That's what I would have done differently for sure.
That's the message I needed to hear today.
Yeah. I know somebody, I went to get a side note. I went to get a facial recently and the woman doing my facial says, what's your resolution for the new year? And my resolution was not to be so hard on myself, not only on myself, but on the people around me too, because I tend to not only have high standards for myself, but for those around me. And that can be tough sometimes. I don't always have to be a tough cookie. So sometimes I can show myself a little grace. So that's definitely what I learned from that. But also just that we're resilient. Debra mentioned that I was a military brat growing up. So this idea of like picking up and starting over again is not new to me. I did it my whole life. And following my intuition, Sarah, I love that point you made, because it was my intuition also that made me email Tanya about this job, right? Like sometimes we just have to go with our guts, and change can be good. So.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are singing our words over us, Yvonne.
Good.
We are your people. We are so thankful you are here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about what I'm hearing you say, Sara has led some really amazing conversations on our stages over the years with other women who are also mothers, who are also a zillion other things.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the thread that connects all of us, no matter what gender or if we have children or not, is this being hard on ourselves. Right.
Yes.
I read this I'm trying to remember who it was. It was this: stop expecting you and everyone around you.
Yeah.
And this idea, and I thought, I sat with that for a second, and I thought, yeah, that is where a lot of our frustration comes from, because we think, well, I would have done it this way.
Yeah.
Right. And if I'm already hard on myself, and then I'm filtering someone else through me, oh dear Lord.
So true. Yeah.
Like, the giving grace, the shaking off shame, all of those things are so incredibly important. Well, I would love to talk about something specifically that you have on your LinkedIn bio, because
Sure.
I always find that between the LinkedIn bio and an Instagram bio, you learn a lot about people, because they have to boil things down.
Right.
And in your bio, you call yourself a DEI disruptor who is challenging the status quo to drive equity and change.
Yeah.
And we share this passion here in the WomanUP community. Really, you heard the ginormous umbrella that Sara holds for CAR, with all, there are so many DEI initiatives or initiatives that serve the underrepresented under her umbrella. And we talk about this a lot in one of the perks, we believe, one of the blessings that comes from bringing more women to the table, is that we bring this divine feminine energy of nurturing and bringing others along with us to the table with us. And so we would love if you would share some of your top tips and tactics for inspiring and the action, right? The implementing of change.
Sure. So first I will say, the piece on my bio about being a disruptor and challenging the status quo, my least favorite thing to hear always is going to be, that's the way we've always done it. So, we've got to do better than the way things have always been done, and doing something new or in a different way isn't always bad. I know it can be uncomfortable, and DEI often is about making people uncomfortable. We can just put it out there that the things that we have to talk about when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion can make people uncomfortable, and we have to sit in that discomfort, and we've got to work through that discomfort. So when it comes to change, though, I think the first step really in inspiring and implementing any change is understanding where you are now, understanding where you want to go, and why you want to do it. I think the why is really important, and sometimes we skip the why, but the why is what becomes the why is what's really our inspiration and our motivation, right? So it means we have to look outward, we have to look around us, and we have to look inward, right? We have to think about what's our current state, what's the future vision, and why is this important? So I'll give you an example. I've been using Noom to try to lose a few pounds. I don't know if you've heard of Noom, the app, right?
I have. Yeah.
So Noom is all based
Instagram.
Noom's all based on psychology, right? So, one of the first steps you have to do in Noom is to step on the scale, and you have to do it every day. And that can be really scary, right? But it sets your baseline, and Noom, Noom, for the person who just asked. So you have to get over that fear, but it helps you understand your baseline, where you are, for better or for worse. Okay, so that's like your first step. You also have to learn not just about calorie counting and caloric density and all of that, but you have to really think about why it is that you want to lose weight. Otherwise, you would you would have been doing it all along, right? So you
So
have
good.
to really understand that. So you have to dig deep. So for me, maybe it's not just about fitting into that dress. It's really more about wanting to change my health or wanting to improve my self-esteem. Like you have to go beyond that first step of the why. And then that becomes your motivation, right? Like I really want to improve my self-esteem or my health or whatever that may be. And then that can guide you. So, Debra asked about recruiting earlier. And so if we relate this to an example, if I am a brokerage leader and I want to attract and retain more diverse agents, right? Let's take it back to brass tactics here. So my first step, I got to look outward into my community and I've got to understand what are the demographics of the community that I operate in, right? What are some of the groups of people that I know are prevalent here that maybe aren't in other places, right? Every community is unique. Here in Chicago, we have a huge Polish population. We have almost 250,000 people who speak Polish here in the city of Chicago. So that is, yeah, right.
Fun fact.
So fun fact for you. Yeah. So, in Minneapolis, St. Paul area, there's a huge Hmong population, right?
Wow.
So you have to understand the community that you operate in, right? So that's first. Now I can look around my office and say, do the people around me reflect the diversity of my community? If I have a huge Hmong population and I operate in Minneapolis, St. Paul, do I have anybody who speaks that language in my office? Do I have anybody who can relate to that community culturally? So you have to understand where your gaps are, right? Maybe you're in a location that has a vibrant LGBTQ plus community, right? If you have an office in San Francisco and you don't have a single gay agent, you probably have a gap, right? So
Just tell them like it is.
I'm just putting it out there. If you're in Atlanta and you don't have any Black agents, you probably have a gap.
Yep.
Okay, so, and there are resources online to help you find out this data, datausa.io, and we can put that in the chat for you later, but datausa.io is a great resource for demographic data for every city in this nation. So now that you understand your community, you look around your office, you understand your gaps, and then you got to look inward and say, what's kept me from doing this all along? Where are my blind spots? How come it didn't dawn on me before that I should have X, Y, and Z folks in my office, right? That means recognizing our own biases, our own blind spots, and now we've got to be intentional about overcoming them. And then ultimately what we talked about before, figuring out your why. Why is it important to me to have more diversity in my office? Is it because I want to reach new markets and grow revenue? Great. Let that be your motivation. Is it because you want to help communities that have historically been marginalized? You want to do the right thing? Great. Let that be your inspiration. But if you think that you're going to do it because you want to check a box, because you heard you should do it, then don't do it. It's like going on a crash diet, right? I'm going to gain the weight back. So you got to do the hard work and you got to do it with intention and you have to do it for the right reasons.
Oh, I'm getting a little choked up.
Oh, Debra.
It's so good. I feel like we've been saying this for so many years. And there's part of me that really does get so frustrated by it feels slow, right?
Yes.
It feels slow. Yet this week, I don't know if any of you saw the wider net phenomenon that flew across the internet. Our very own Sara Sudachan was on the list of these 100. They started with 100. The names are being added left and right on fire on the Facebook group. We'll be sure.
The wider net.
Yes, the wider net. You see these lists and they're like, stop saying there aren't people of color. Stop saying there aren't
diverse leaders.
There aren't diverse leaders of all shapes, shades, sizes, decisions, choices, whatever you're looking for, it exists. And that the power is these stories, right? I love that you're giving the community these questions, like why wasn't I thinking about that before today?
Yeah.
And being okay. I've said this a couple of times on the show, being okay that you weren't 100% plugged in yesterday, and praise and be so thankful that you were blessed to be here in this moment, hearing Ivonne ask you that question. and don't let it stop with you. Right. We talk about this all the time in the community. Those of you who are here with us live, watching the replay, listening to it on the podcast, ask someone else these questions, forward this replay. Like this is how we make change right here.
Right.
One of my favorite change quotes that I just learned last week, like memorized, I mean, is change is inevitable. Suffering is optional. So let us stop suffering, right? Let us stop suffering and speed things up and have more conversations, because you've given us a beautiful roadmap to light a fire in each of us. So I'm so thankful.
Thank you. But yeah, I mean, progress is slow. So I understand the frustration, and working in DEI can be mentally exhausting because you feel like not enough is happening fast enough, right? And you have to recognize that people are on different levels of understanding, different places on their DEI journey, as we say. And so you have to give people the tools and ask the tough questions to get them to even understand where to start. And just, understanding your current state is the best place to start.
And I've had several conversations with Farah Wilder on my team about this, because it's not only mentally exhausting, it's triggering.
Yes.
The stuff that you can uncover, or the
Absolutely.
stuff that just comes across your desk or your email, it can be very harsh.
Yeah.
And it's tough work. So I think that I have another question, but I want to ask you about allyship, because what Debra just kind of laid out was the epitome of allyship. So how can we all be better allies for each other? And that's the root of what WomanUP is all about. It's about supporting and advocating for, and when you're not in the room. But I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think the easiest and most powerful thing you can do to be an ally is to listen. It's really that simple. It's to listen. Listen to the lived experiences of other people. Listen to what other people have gone through. Listen to people when they tell you that they have an obstacle or a struggle that's based on their race or their gender. Do not dismiss it. Try to have empathy for it. And you may never truly understand what it's like to walk in their shoes, but you can try to have compassion and empathy and just listen to their stories. It's kind of like the Me Too movement, right? Like, we have to start listening to women's stories and believing them. And that same thing goes for race, orientation, ethnicity, all these other things. We have to start believing the stories. I recently heard not a great story, but a very eye-opening story. We had a white woman who is a brokerage leader in Alabama, in Birmingham. And she wanted to, with intention, attract more Black agents into her office. So she went to a Black broker owner who also operates in Birmingham. And one of the things she learned from that other owner was that owner offers all of her Black agents a class on what to do when the cops show up at a home showing. Okay. The white woman, the owner, it had never even crossed her mind that this is a training offering that she would have to give to her Black agents. Okay. This is based on the lived experiences of agents who have had this happen to them time and again. So those are the kind of stories that you need to hear, and they make us uncomfortable, but they're the reality. And that now has sparked change for that other broker owner who opened her eyes to this, this thing that was going on with people in her community. So So that's a long story short. I'd say listening is the most powerful thing we can do.
I think that's the best advice I've heard all day. It's something that I tout. I think to be an effective leader or community, person in your community, the best thing you can do is listen. And so you and I are tracking. I love that. It's so important. And here's the thing. That example, that story, her listening has now changed her life. It changed the lives of her agents, and it changed the life of the other broker, because now the other broker feels seen and heard.
Yeah. And has an ally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Just beautiful. Anyway, okay, I got off track, but that was
That's
a
okay.
wonderful little road. Anyway,
that rabbit hole we just went down.
side road. Thank you. Rabbit hole. It was a great rabbit hole. But looking at the road ahead,
Yes.
let's talk about some of the challenges that the brokerage industry or a broker leader we're facing. We are facing a medley of them. So
yeah.
so from your perspective, where you
Yeah.
sit, what's on your radar and how can our community prepare for what's to come?
So setting aside all of the obvious challenges of the current real estate market, right? I think we all know what some of those challenges are. I mean, my husband and I tried to put an offer on an investment property this week and there were 15 other offers. So, you know, it's a little crazy right now. But, you know, needless to say, beyond the real estate industry specifically, I think all business leaders right now have some global market trends that we need to be cognizant of. All right. So if we think long term, there are these global trends that are all related to diversity. So we know that our world, not just our country, not just our individual communities, our world is becoming more diverse. So we have a diversity of markets, we have a diversity of ideas, we have a diversity of customers, and we have a diversity of talent. And all of those things are just going to continue to get more diverse over time.
Amen.
And our customers are having more choices than ever. Our talent has more choices than ever on where to go and where to work. Our next generation of talent has different wants and needs than maybe previous generations before. This diversity of ideas is leading us to technology and innovation that we've never had before. So there are all these kind of myriad of changes that relate to diversity happening at the same time. So if you're a leader in any business, you really have to think about how you embrace those changes in order to thrive. Because if you don't start to embrace that diversity, you know, if we think about, like I said, I mentioned I worked at a steel manufacturing company, right? If you imagine steel worker, older men in general, right? People who've worked in the steel mill on the line for 30 years. And that held true with the demographics. You know, I'm not speaking out of turn. So, but at some point you had to think about how are we going to attract new people to come work in the steel mill? How are we going to attract women to come work in a steel mill? How are we going to attract a 20-year-old who'd rather DoorDash and work in the gig economy to come work in a steel mill, right? Because eventually, if you don't have people working in it, it's going to go away, or you got to figure out a new way to make steel, which is a different story, right? So anyway, at some point you have to adapt to the changing diversity of our world. You know, we have to adapt to the new cultures and the new age groups. And, you know, we know that Latino first-time home buyers are going to outpace the rest. We know that by 2044, the groups of people that we currently call minorities, quote unquote, will be the majority in this country by 2044. So if we don't adapt,
we already are in California.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So
we already are.
so anyway, so I'd say those are the things that I think a brokerage leader or any business owner really just needs to keep on their radar for long-term success and vision.
Yeah.
Do you have a resource that you go to that or some sort of report that shows up in your inbox? Like, where do you, I mean, you're dropping some amazing stats and we love those around here.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, some of the big consulting firms in this country, McKinsey, Deloitte, KPMG, they all put out really great reports around global business trends, especially related to diversity. So any of those are a great resource. Deloitte in particular has some great reports around kind of the changing diversity of our world.
And if I may, just a shameless plug for my team, we have an
Nice.
amazing research team that does a lot of research and look at home ownership rates by ethnicity in California. And I know NAR, we go to NAR as well for a lot of reports that deal specifically in the real estate space. But yeah, those, we read those too. Those are really great resources.
Yeah, and our, other partner industry organizations like NAREP and ARIA have their annual reports that they put out as well. I know that Hispanic homebuyer stat comes from the annual NAREP report. So those are always great resources. But I'm going to turn up my light a little bit here. I'm losing my natural light here in Chicago. So.
For a second, I thought, did she just change her coat?
No, it's just I had my
now,
blinds open, and as I'm losing natural light outside, it's just getting dark. Eventually, I'll just be in the dark.
I love it. Well, I think it's so important for us to talk about the reports that we have access to, because I think we as leaders forget that what comes second nature to, like, oh, of course we've got those reports. CAR offers those reports. NAR offers those reports. That there are people who are listening to us today who have never read any of those reports. Right. So thank you so much for sharing those. And
sure.
Sarah, it's never anything, no shame in plugging CAR and all of the amazing things you do over there, but it is a great reminder. Let's get those links into the show notes. And we are talking about on the IamWomanUp.com site, having kind of a resource page with white papers and reports and things like that. So we'll be sure to add these to there as well. Okay, so let's talk quickly about, necessarily quickly, but let's talk about defining and refining 2022, right? We learned I think in 2021, when we all went, woohoo, new year. Yeah. And then the breaks happened again. We kind of experienced that again. Yeah. And so let's talk about the things that we know that's happening, but what is on your vision board that you're excited about, that you're looking forward to, sure. And that maybe it could be something that helps us remember that flexibility is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, here at Realogy, we have a new initiative called Go Further Together, and it's all about flexibility in a hybrid workforce. And we even started something called Focus Fridays, where we're not scheduling meetings on Fridays to allow us some time to really focus. And so we are really getting on board with these new ways of working, and it's fantastic. And when we think about it from a diversity perspective, I know, in a real estate brokerage, you're operating in a local community, but if you work in more of a corporate setting or something else, for the purposes of recruiting, we've really opened up our imaginations to where we can recruit people from. Even a couple of years ago, I would either have had to move to New Jersey or would not even have been considered for this role because I don't live anywhere near the Realogy headquarters, right? Yes. So this hybrid new way of working has really opened up a whole new world for us when it comes to recruiting diverse talent from all across the country and even the world. So that's something to keep in mind. But then, like I said, even at the local level, we can rethink how we've always done things. Does everything need to be a meeting? Can it be an email? I think we've already started to do those things naturally because we've had to, but there's no reason that some of those ways of working can't continue. So, and for me, now that I work remotely and I travel for events and such, I mentioned with my older son, I had to make a lot of tough career choices being a single mom, and I'm running back and forth to daycare and I can't go to a PTA meeting, and I have two little ones now, and being able to be home and present when they get on the bus and come home is invaluable to me at this stage in my career. So, for me, this idea of being flexible and being able to work remotely has really just been such a blessing. So that's something great that's come out of these last couple of years for me. But on the business front, when I think about like what's on the horizon for 2022, for Realogy, it's going to be all about elevating our DEI to the next level. So like I said, we really have done great work long before I came along with our inclusive ownership program. We put a stake in the ground with the Equality Act. We've brought in more diverse franchise owners. We've had great success with programs like Empowering Latinas, which offers scholarships to young women through Century 21 programming. Yes. We have a program called What Moves Her, which is all about empowering women, very aligned with WomanUP. We have this long history of industry partnerships. So now my job is to think about how do we now take things to the next level, right? And I'm so excited because I think we have this tremendous opportunity to leverage our collective impact to really make a difference. And I see our DEI impact like circles on a target, not to go back to my target reference, but the bullseye is our employees and our internal culture. And then the next layer out is our agents and our franchise owners. And the next layer out is this real estate industry. And we can go beyond that to that final layer, which is society on a more broad scale, where we are really impacting things like fair housing and opening up entrepreneurship and homeownership for more communities and building generational wealth. So that's the part that excites me, but I think we have to start at the center of the bullseye. So this year in 2022, I really want that to be our focus as we continue to make that external impact. So thinking about things long term, that first thing is strengthening our internal culture. And this can go for any of you who run your own business too, right? Think about how you strengthen your internal culture. How do you create a more inclusive work environment, a place that's innovative where everyone can thrive? And then enhancing our diverse representation, both internally and in our agent and franchisee base. How do we attract more diverse agents? How do we reflect the communities that we live in and operate in and serve? And then economic empowerment. How do we, help people thrive through entrepreneurship and through homeownership and wealth building? And then finally, like I said, that external impact. How do we just change this industry that we know, if we're being frank, we know we still have a long way to go, right? So I think we can make progress on all of those things in 2022, but progress isn't always overnight. So it's going to be kind of making strides and taking baby steps to get us there.
I love that. I want to highlight something that you said, because
Sure.
we had an experience with Tanya around this as well. Being in such a time as this, where women can be executives in kick-ass companies like Realogy and pick their kids up at the bus stop.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And I think it's important for us all to realize, it reminds me of my girlfriends who do have kids. I'm an auntie. So, but this, the days are long, but the years are short, right? This concept, I feel like this is one of those moments that we need to celebrate that. We need to celebrate that we're on this call, the three of us, with a huge community that's going to be hearing that story from you, who they also heard it from your leader.
That's right.
When she was on the show, that's something that's important to her.
Yeah.
And I think the more we do share those stories that we've been told for decades before, we don't talk about that. A mother was supposed to hide being a mother at work. That it's so I'm so grateful that, my nieces and my grandnieces will grow up in a world where, of course, you pick your kids up from the school bus.
Exactly.
It's not even a question.
Yeah.
So I'm
and
so
actually,
thankful.
The other point I just want to make, my kids got home while I was on this call, but my husband's home, so he can greet them when they come off the bus too. So, it's not just about me, or the expectation isn't just for me to be doing it all the time. So I think that's important to note as well, is, that it's important for parents of every gender.
So I have a fun share for you though, Ivonne, because my daughter has been known to make an appearance on this show because her school was done at 2:30. So every day when they were home remote schooling, she would just walk in and be like, "Hi, WomanUP."
Oh yeah, she would strut in hello.
My kids and my cat have all made appearances on my calls, so it's all good.
Yep. And that's okay. And let's normalize that, because we are mothers.
Yeah. I want to know their names. I want to know what grade they're in. I want to know their names. I want to be introduced. Absolutely.
That's right. Exactly. Oh, well, my whole team knows Juliet. My son is a teenager, so he's like, "Nah, you're on video."
No, okay.
I'm good. But Juliet's like, "Hi, Farah. Hi, Debra." She's like, "Hi, Jordan." She just goes on and on. She's great. Anyway, it's come to our time. And before I ask you our final words of wisdom, and you've brought so much wisdom today, so thank you. Why don't you share with us some podcasts or book recommendations that you love to share over and over and over again?
Sure, I will. So right now I'm reading, and I actually have it here. I'm reading this book called Edge by Laura Huang.
Ooh.
And it's about turning adversity into advantage. and it's fantastic. I'm not done with it, so I hate to recommend a book I'm not done reading, but it's very good. And it's actually the book that we had. We ran a cohort in 2021 of diverse talent within Realogy, a mentoring program where we paired our diverse talent with our executive leadership to help mentor and sponsor them. And this was a book that we had everybody read and then discuss, and got so much great feedback on it that it inspired me to read it myself. And so far it's fantastic. So other book I would recommend if you are changing careers, changing jobs, doing anything that requires you to do something new, strongly recommend The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins. It's got very practical tips for how to make an early impact and how to not make a bunch of mistakes right when you start. So those are two of my recommendations. I'd also say IdeaCast from Harvard Business Review always has great leadership tips. It's a nice one to listen to in the car. But since I do DEI, I'd be kind of remiss to not mention, like, we all owe it to ourselves to really deepen our knowledge around multicultural awareness. So, you know, if you are not African American yourself, I would suggest reading some Black authors like James Baldwin or Ta-Nehisi Coates. You know, The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin for me was transformative. You know, he wrote it in 1963 and it's still so powerful and relevant today. I'd also urge you to follow thought leaders on LinkedIn or Twitter. You know, follow Black Twitter, follow DEI leaders on LinkedIn. They are always dropping bombs of wisdom on an almost daily basis. And equally, you know, start reading books from Latina authors and things like that too. Just, you know, try to expand your point of view in the media that you're ingesting. And that doesn't just go for books, that goes for the TV shows you consume. You know, like I love the show Insecure on HBO. It's all about a group of Black women. It is a fantastic show. You know, watch Encanto on Disney. You know, whatever it is, like if you are not that, watch something that, you know, that helps you create allyship or awareness. And it doesn't have to be a heavy book. It can be just something lighter, you know. You know, I would also recommend Masterclass. If you don't have a subscription to it, I would recommend a subscription to Masterclass. I just did a masterclass from RuPaul and about being your authentic self. And I swear it was one of the best classes I've taken. I love RuPaul, watch RuPaul's Drag Race. And, you know, there's just so much to learn, and so much to learn beyond business, you know, like Masterclass, you can learn how to make pizza or whatever. So I love that because it's all about kind of personal enrichment versus just business acumen. So that's another thing I'd recommend. But I also say just have fun. You know, sometimes our days can be so heavy. So, you know, at the end of the day, you want a glass of wine and watch The Real Housewives, like, you go, you know. Yeah.
I love it.
I've been doing, this is a just total, what I've been doing after work is a glass of wine and watching A Handmaid's Tale, which is
there you go.
so crazy.
I've never. How do you not throw the wine
heavy.
at
That's
the
deep.
TV?
I know.
Oh my goodness. I just, this has been such a joy. I mean, we're so grateful.
It's so fun.
That
Thank you so much
joined
for
us.
having me.
Yeah, it's like hanging out with your girlfriends on Friday afternoon. However, yeah, it is the top of the hour. So one of the things that we're doing new this year for those of you who were here last week is we are going to stop the recording of the conversation, and we're going to do a little rapid fire and some conversations with Ivonne after the show. So if you want to stick around, please do. For those of you who are watching the replay and are like, no, this is the perk of joining us live. You get to hear the rapid fire answer. So make sure that you sign up, IamWomanUp.com/live. Sign up to receive the notifications of Zoom and join us here every Tuesday at 2:00. And when we have a shine a light on her, you will get the inside scoop. All right. For those of you who are here with us live, stick around. The last bit of reminding is get on over to the Woman Up Facebook group. If you're not on Facebook, make sure that you've signed up on the email list so that you have all of the updates, what's coming up this year, the white paper, the events. As soon as we know when we're going to be anywhere in person, those are the two places we update first. So make sure you go to IamWomanUp.com, scroll all the way down to the bottom and sign up there, or just wait until the ocean waves slide in from the right-hand side and fill out the form. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll see you next week.
Thank
Bye.
you, Ivonne.